right, so it looks like Joe Biden is still trying to pay for this next infrastructure package that he's putting forward with raises on taxes for wealthy individuals and corporations. We've dissected his tax policy, the specifics of it, and how really basically all it's doing is half undoing a lot of the stuff that Trump did with his tax cuts that he implemented. We also talk about modern monetary theory a lot on this channel and how, you don't need to tax a one-to-one correlation for how much you're spending. If you're investing in infrastructure, then it's going to pay for itself because you're expanding the economy, you're creating new jobs, etc. So there's a totally wrong mindset going on here within the Democratic Party as to how they're going to tackle this next infrastructure package. And even with the moderate tax proposals that Joe Biden is putting forward here, it seems like he's running up into opposition. So here's what they had to say. Jeff Stein here knew the head of the DCCC is privately warning the White House that its tax plan could hurt vulnerable Democrats in 2022. So what exactly are they talking about here? Here's what they're talking about. Raising the corporate tax rate to 28%. Okay, reminder, Trump cut it from 35% down to 21%. Joe Biden wants to raise it halfway back up to that. The corporate tax rate is as low as it's ever been in this country, okay? So they have a problem with even raising it half back up to that. Capital gains doubling for those earning over $1 million. So we're raising taxes on those people who are making over $1 million in corporate tax or in capital gains every year. So over $1 million. So obviously just talking about wealthy individuals here. Impact of heirs tax on farmers, as well as the lack of the SALT repeal. So the SALT tax is something that very disproportionately benefits wealthy individuals, specifically in like California and New York. Elitist blue state Democrats specifically benefit significantly from that tax proposal. And even they have a problem with that, as well as extent of hikes on multinationals or international sides. So that's basically the whole White House tax plan. And so given this context in this situation with Democrats opposing even the moderate tax proposals that Joe Biden is putting forward, Bernie Sanders did an interview with Axios where he basically dissected the current state of the Democratic Party and how a lot of the things that we're talking about here, like with their opposition to raising corporate taxes, are just totally disconnected from what actual real people want. And here's what he had to say in his analysis.
I wonder what you think about this trend. It's not just in America, it's actually in other Western countries where center-left and left parties, it's the education divide. They're becoming more reliant on college-educated voters, and they're losing non-college educated voters.
And it's urban and rural as well.
Urban, rural as well, for sure. Why do you think that's happening?
Well, I think if I am a working class person in this country, I've seen my job go to China. I'm working for $9 an hour when I used to make $20 an hour. I don't have health care, or I can't afford it, or I can't afford prescription drugs. You're resentful. Are we talking to those people? I think we're beginning to see that in the last few months under Biden. But Democrats traditionally have been very tepid, very fearful about going big. And I will say,
I think there's a glossiness to it as well, sort of San Francisco, New York glossiness to the party.
I'm so smart. I am really smart, and, we go to $100 dinners, and who really cares about those working class people? I think it is fair to say, as a result of heavy-duty corporate campaign contributions, Democratic Party has drifted away from being the party of FDR and even Harry Truman in being understood and perceived correctly as the working class party.
If that can't be changed, that trend of Democratic Party becomes the party of the college-educated, Republicans become the party of the not. Do you think that's sustainable for a progressive party?
No, I don't, and I don't think it's sustainable for American democracy. So, we want a party that welcomes all people in.
Biden didn't put it in his plan, but Schumer and Pelosi want it, and a few others want it, is restoring this state and local tax deduction, the SALT, which is a tax break for rich people in blue states.
Yep.
You don't support that?
No.
What do you think if Democrats bring that back?
It sends a terrible, terrible message. So ultimately, what you have got to do, and it's in fairness to Schumer and Pelosi, it is hard when you have tiny margins, but you have got to make it clear which side you are on, and you can't be on the side of the wealthy and the powerful if you're going to really fight for working families.
Right. So I think that he's right on so many different fronts in this analysis. The first thing that stood out to me in this analysis was him talking about how not only can the Democratic Party not survive in its current trajectory, but American democracy, whatever remnants of democracy you want to say that the United States has, can't survive as well. Why not? Because when you don't have a progressive party that is not only progressive on the social issues, but is also progressive on the economic issues and appeals to a broad range of working class Americans on the economic issues, then not only is the Democratic Party going to die, but that opens the door for right-wing populists. That opens the door for fake populists like Donald Trump to go and win the presidency, right? I mean, this is exactly what happened in 2016. It was because he was up against somebody like Hillary Clinton, who is an enemy of the working class, if there ever was somebody who could fit that definition, who supported the trade deals that shipped American jobs overseas to China, as he pointed out in that clip, that decimated all of these other communities, specifically in like the upper Midwest, where she ended up losing the election. So this is a perfect descriptor of how the Democratic Party is failing itself, but also failing the American people. Because if you're going to open the door where the American working class feels so decimated and left behind that they are willing to go and trust somebody like Donald Trump to represent them more than the Democratic Party, that just says that you've completely gone off track. As he said, you've completely abandoned the FDR mindset, even though some people like to say that Joe Biden is heading more so in that direction. But you completely abandoned the FDR style of governance, and you're instead pushing austerity measures when you don't need to. And that brings me to the next point about this infrastructure package. There's a couple mistakes being made. One is by Joe Biden, okay? He still has this mindset, of course, because he is Joe Biden, that they have to raise the funds to pay for every single thing in this infrastructure bill. And that's just not true. You just don't need to do that. There are situations where deficit spending makes sense. And right now is one of those situations. Because when you invest in infrastructure, okay, and even Joe Biden's infrastructure plan doesn't go nearly far enough. He wants to spend roughly $2 trillion over 8 years. That's like a third yearly of what we spend on our military budget. It's not even close to enough. But the reason why you go big on infrastructure is because it creates jobs, is because it goes directly into the economy. There are direct ways that you can see economic benefits from investing in infrastructure. It's not like when you go and invest in new roads or bridges or ports or whatever the infrastructure may be. It's not like that money just goes out the window. You're creating jobs. You're fueling the economy. That it's a direct payoff that you get from going big and investing in these things. So there's a mindset shift that should happen with Biden. I don't think that it will, but with Democrats in general as well, where you need to detach yourself from this idea that we need to pay for everything up front. That's not how the government works, okay? Somehow it's okay that we increase the military budget every single year and we're spending nearly $1 trillion emptying that out into our military, which, by the way, is not a good investment. That does not pay for itself. But then suddenly when it comes to something like infrastructure, oh, well, then we need to really be, accounting for every single last thing that we spend, and we can't possibly add to the deficit, and we need to raise taxes and this and that. It's just the wrong mindset. But even with that being said, and even if I accept that Joe Biden's, his infrastructure plan is what it is, his tax proposals are what they are, and he's not going to go any further left on those things, even with that, and even with the moderate approach that he is taking to that, Democrats still have a problem with it. They still have a problem with it. Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, a lot of these other elitist, corrupt Democrats that are in the Democratic establishment and that control the party, they still have a problem with that. They still want to bring back the SALT tax for these wealthy individuals in New York City and San Francisco so that they can get further tax breaks. And like Bernie said, this just sends the wrong message. It sends the message that you're willing to go to the mat and fight for a tax plan that disproportionately benefits the wealthy. You're not willing to raise corporate taxes even back to what they were under Obama, okay, let alone all throughout U.S. history. And you're not willing to raise capital gains tax on people making over $1 million a year off from capital gains. So all of these things just add up to the same message. Democrats are moving further and further away from representing the working class. And if you want to have a sustainable party moving into the future, you can't do that. I mean, we just had polls that recently came out that said not only would it not hurt Democrats to do the tax plan that Joe Biden is putting forward or even go more aggressive, but there was polling that came out. Let me see if I can pull this up here. There was polling that came out that said raising taxes on the rich would increase the popularity of Joe Biden's infrastructure plan. 57% of voters say they would be more likely to support Biden's infrastructure plan if it were funded by tax increases on those making over 400K. So it doesn't even make sense from any perspective on this. Even if you're going to go with the austerity-minded approach that Joe Biden is looking to go for, it makes it more popular the more you go out and say, I'm going to pay for this using tax increases on the wealthy. So it's not something they should be leaning away from. It's something they should be leaning into. And they have a completely backwards mindset, but at least we have Bernie Sanders who's able to still go out there and try to direct them onto the right course. So that's what you need to do. Go more aggressive on the tax increases on the wealthy. Go more aggressive on investments in infrastructure and spending, because that's what this moment calls for. That's what the American people want. So do what the American people want. Do what's good for the working class, and stop listening to corrupt motherfuckers like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi.